Why does Licorice Pizza feel to some like a meandering, unstructured film?
I met the girl I'm gonna marry one day, Greg.
Oh yeah?
Its plot seems to be going nowhere fast. A succession of vignettes following a teenage boy dragging a young adult woman into his random get-money-quick schemes, with her usually ending up tired of him. Chaos reigns, and disconnection is always potentially around the corner of even the most intimate moments between Gary and Alana. But doesn't that just sound like life? I certainly recognise my own in the film's disorder, in its ambiguous emotions and sudden shifts between love and contempt. Like Freddie Quell in Paul Thomas Anderson's earlier film, The Master, it's a film that's adrift. So for audiences looking to cinema for simple narratives that give a clear sense of the world, Licorice Pizza may feel like a shock.
Relax, it's my nozzle.
Although ironically perhaps, at its core, it's also a fairly simple love story, if you ignore the age gap. This video is sponsored by Mubi. Get 1 month free at mubi.com/thediscardedimage. The film's first needle drop is Nina Simone's July Tree, whose lyrics powerfully put across the director's intent. True love seed in the autumn ground. When will it be found? How long will it take to grow? Simone's words suggest the seed is being planted in these young innocents, and the film will be about the flowering of that, and how they realise it themselves, which sounds like a romantic comedy trope. But perhaps the word to focus on here is grow. The evolution of this relationship won't necessarily be consistent or pretty. Growth is a complicated process, one that romantic comedies don't tend to show, as they usually focus on the honeymoon phase of a romance. And in terms of the rom-com lineage, Anderson's film is more in the screwball tradition, a genre that stretched credibility to translate the absolute chaos of love.
Will you get off my running boy?
This is my running boy!
All right, honey, stay there.
Licorice Pizza's mayhem and its shambolic plotting, when contrasted with its simple romanticism, is just one example of what I see as the film's core dynamic, which is a push and pull between opposing forces.
It does.
It doesn't.
It does.
It doesn't. It's about more.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
When Alana is first introduced, Anderson's camera tracks alongside her, but when Gary shows up and makes her walk alongside him, the camera goes in reverse. The push-pull is crystallized right there. Gary has altered her course in every way, and despite some resistance, she can't help but follow him.
So, Alana, what are your plans?
Their first date makes clear that Alana herself understands how directionless she is,
I don't know.
and by contrast, how certain of himself and his future Gary is.
I'm a showman. It's my calling. I don't know how to do anything else. It's what I'm meant to do.
Alana is caught in a sort of mid-20s purgatory, a push-pull between adolescence and adulthood. When she comes home from the date, her father grills her like a teenager.
Lisa!
Yeah, she works
I
with
don't know,
me
Lisa.
at Tiny Toes.
What?
Yes.
And the dynamic with her sisters feels more like one someone much younger would have.
Why are you dressed like that? You want a date?
It's hard to grow into an adult when you're in the same circumstances you've always been in, and she's clearly desperate to get away from an environment that is stunting her growth.
He was gonna take me out of here, Essie! Don't you even look at me!
Therefore, any connection she feels towards Gary would be a further regression, not to mention the ethics of being involved with a boy his age. However, Gary's entire person also seems to represent this push and pull between adolescence and adulthood. He may only be on the verge of 16, but he's an old soul, clearly more mature than his age would suggest, which is probably in large part due to the absent father in his household, a role he has had to fill.
Love you, baby.
Love you too.
However, just because he seems to be more sure of himself doesn't mean he's totally grounded, or that his future is clearly laid out. Gary is always scrambling, and is on a constant hustle game. When he first met Alana, he knew the odds were stacked against him, so he had to react in the moment, knowing his minor celebrity was the only way he could keep her interested.
Did you see Under One Roof?
Yeah?
You're looking at Tony. You can wear the new Sears 10-1 suit this way.
As he's becoming too old to be a child actor, he has to scramble again to find a new venture for himself, one that comes completely at random, showing he's drifting and directionless too. He's drawn in by a sultry shop worker, highlighting that, as a horny teenager, a major part of his drive is sex.
Hello, baby. How can I help you?
What is that?
That is a bed made of water, sweetheart.
It's also partly why he's pursuing Alana, which creates another push-pull between the more spiritual, romantic connection they share and the more sexual one, which Alana, for obvious reasons, resists.
Can I touch them?
This kind of contradiction is a familiar theme in Anderson's work.
Hello, this is back.
I'm calling for Jack.
Take, for example, Barry Egan calling up a woman for phone sex. Even though it seems like he's just looking for someone to talk to,
You sound very nice and very personable.
or the contrast between the primal, sex-obsessed Freddie Quell and the religious spirituality of Lancaster Dodd's Scientology-like operation.
Marriage!
Previous to the cause was awful.
In that film, Anderson pokes holes in their doctrine, in the same way he's highly critical of religion in There'll Be Blood, seeing it as something a preacher can use for his opportunistic thirst for power. Licorice Pizza sees Anderson dealing with something more basic and, in a sense, more innocent. The spiritual component of the pair's intimate connection isn't questioned in the same way, besides, of course, the age gap, but the characters do seem to be questioning it themselves, consciously or unconsciously.
I think it's weird that I hang out with Gary and his 15-year-old friends all the time.
They're frequently finding different partners in a game of one-upmanship. They lay jealousy traps in an attempt to exploit the power they have over each other. These power games are also common to Anderson's work. His films frequently have two opposing foes who are in a struggle for control and dominance.
That's it.
Again, the stakes here are much less severe than in There'll Be Blood's epic battle between symbols of capitalism and religion.
Jesus Christ!
Or even in Phantom Thread, where both Alma and Reynolds pushed each other's limits more viciously. Yet in their own, more modest way, they are testing each other and spurring each other on to do better.
Alana, you would still be taking pictures at my high school of children if it wasn't for me.
You're talking about pinball machines. I'm a politician.
What these two characters are doing is clearly less calculated than Plainview's ruthless quest for dominance. Their actions are usually more impulsive. This spontaneity and restlessness is symbolized in the film's most absurdly chaotic character, John Peters, who is an intense exaggeration of both Alana's lack of direction and Gary's high libido.
I'm John Peters. My only problem in life is I don't love tail too much. I love it so much.
Peters is just pure id, driven to a rage 1 second and then by sex the next.
Do you like peanut butter sandwiches?
This section of the film brings Alana's drifting arc to its apex. She reaches the breaking point of what she can take of Gary's childish behavior and his male ego power games. Driving backwards down the valley's hilly terrain is as if she's regressing. It's a wake-up call to the dangers that come with not growing up.
We did, you did, Alana, you did it. We did it.
She realizes she needs to find something more adult. She has been craving this the whole time, but the men she's gravitated towards don't seem to be much more mature than Gary. Like Peters, Jack Holden is essentially a man-child. And he seems to be regressing himself, lost in a daze of fame and the faded glory of his youth. Alana pushes against her youth and begins working on the Joe Wox political campaign, which makes her feel like she's evolved to a higher plane, whilst Gary moves on to pinball machines, which she finds juvenile. But eventually, this dichotomy between children and adults proves to be a false one. Alana realizes that the adult world isn't all it's cracked up to be.
I want you to myself.
Well, that's just not how the world works, is it?
And grown-ups are also constantly going forwards and backwards between their hearts and their brains, their love and their ambition, themselves and others. Somewhat ironically, is this realization that adulthood isn't a secure destination, but rather an endless journey in seesaw that makes Alana finally return to Gary. If there's no clear answer and no right way to grow up, she'd rather face this impossible problem with Gary, because despite all his games, he's always there when it counts. You could say the final push-pull is between what the characters think and what they feel. Although Alana may have thought Gary was immature or simply too young for her, they can't deny the deep, wide connection they share. When push comes to shove and one of them is in danger, that connection takes over. And they can't help but run to each other. Lying on a fat Bernie waterbed, the water molecules make their connection feel cosmic, as if the stars have aligned just for them. and even Gary has learnt to resist spoiling this special moment. If the whole film is chaotic and disjointed, it serves to create an imbalance that is centered eventually, like being pulled back down by a gravitational force, because even though they antagonize each other and often seem as if they are going to part ways, every push only makes the next pull stronger. Licorice Pizza was my favourite film of 2021, but Ryosuke Hamaguchi's Drive My Car, which just won the Best International Feature Film at the Oscars, was also right up there for me, and it's currently streaming exclusively on Mubi in the UK and many other countries. It's an intimate epic, following a theatre director who's putting on Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, and the film reinterprets many of Chekhov's themes. Hamaguchi has art coinciding with life, theatre with film. It's beautifully paced, rewarding its gradual build-up, and it's quite the emotional ride, so if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you check it out. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place with a truly eclectic selection of some of the best and most interesting cinema, all hand-selected. Every day, they premiere a new film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. And you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/thediscardedimage and get a whole month of great cinema for free.